ladies and gentlemen. There comes a moment in every person's life when the weight of past wounds becomes almost unbearable. It is at these moments that we must acknowledge the hurt and start the process of healing. This is particularly true for those who, through no fault of their own, have suffered at the hands of others, especially young women who have been mistreated, neglected, or harmed in some way. The first step in healing a girl who hasn't been treated right is the recognition of the wounds she carries. These are not superficial cuts or bruises, they are deep, emotional scars that may be invisible to the eye, but felt intensely in the heart. And these wounds cannot be ignored, denied, or brushed aside. To heal, we must first look them in the eye and understand their weight. It is only through acknowledgement that the road to recovery can begin. But understanding these wounds isn't enough. Healing is not a passive process, it requires active participation. Healing comes through taking responsibility, not just by the one who has been wronged, but also by those who surround her. There is no room for passivity in recovery. Those who care about her must step up not to fix things, but to support her in taking responsibility for her own healing. Healing is not about sympathy, it is about empowerment. Empowerment comes from the understanding that recovery is possible, but it requires work, resilience, and personal commitment. At the heart of healing lies a deep respect for autonomy. Every individual must be free to make decisions about their own life and their own healing process. A girl who has been mistreated must be empowered to take back control of her narrative. She may not have chosen the hurt she's endured, but she has the power to choose how she moves forward. The journey may be long, and it may be difficult, but it is hers to take. And it is only through reclaiming this autonomy that she can rebuild a sense of self-worth and confidence. As part of this journey, there is a vital truth that must be embraced: the power of meaning. It is so easy, in the wake of trauma, to fall into despair, to think that life is pointless or that one's suffering is futile. But that is a dangerous trap. The true potential for healing comes when we are able to see meaning in our suffering. The pain, as excruciating as it may be, can be transformed into something that leads to growth, resilience, and understanding. It's not about forgetting the past, it's about finding purpose in it. Life will throw challenges our way, but it's in how we respond to those challenges that we find meaning, and it's in that meaning that healing truly begins. But none of this can happen without trust. Trust in others, yes, but most importantly, trust in oneself. A girl who has been hurt must gradually come to believe that she is worthy of love, respect, and care. She must trust that she can make decisions that benefit her well-being. And those who care for her must show, through consistent supportive actions, that trust is safe to rebuild. Trust is fragile, but when nurtured, it is one of the strongest forces in the healing process. Healing is also about confronting the past, not to be trapped in it, but to understand it and integrate it into the larger story of who she is becoming. There is no healing without facing the truth of what has happened. But that truth doesn't have to define her. She must confront the pain, understand it, and then use it as fuel to drive her forward. By incorporating the lessons of the past, she can transcend the damage done and rebuild herself with even greater strength. As she rebuilds, a critical part of that process is learning to set boundaries. Boundaries are a form of self-respect. They are a way of saying, I will not allow others to treat me in ways that are harmful. Setting boundaries is often one of the hardest things for someone who has been mistreated, especially if they have been taught that their needs or feelings don't matter. But this is a key part of healing. The girl who has been wronged must learn to say no when necessary and to protect herself from further harm. It's not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-care. Finally, healing is not something that can be done in isolation. Yes, personal responsibility is critical, but we must also understand that we are not meant to heal alone. The presence of caring, understanding people is essential in this process. Friends, family, mentors, or professionals can provide the emotional safety that allows a girl to heal. They offer a refuge where she can rebuild trust, reflect on her journey, and grow without fear of being judged or abandoned. No one can heal alone, and no one should have to. Healing a girl who hasn't been treated right is a long, complex process that requires effort, patience, and understanding. It demands that she take responsibility for her healing, reclaim her time or autonomy, find meaning in her suffering, and rebuild trust in herself and others. It requires that she confront the past, set boundaries, and lean on the support of others. But above all, it requires a recognition of her inherent worth, because no one, no matter what they've been through, deserves to be defined by their wounds. They are not their past. They are the potential for something greater. Healing begins with acknowledging the depth of the wounds that someone carries. When a girl has been mistreated or harmed in some way, whether through neglect, abuse, or betrayal, these experiences often leave lasting emotional scars. These scars are not always visible to the eye, but they shape how she perceives herself, how she trusts others, and how she navigates the world around her. These deep emotional wounds are often far more profound than physical injuries, yet society tends to downplay or overlook them, dismissing them as not that serious or something that can simply be moved past. But healing cannot begin in earnest until the full weight of these emotional wounds is recognized. The pain that comes from mistreatment is unique to each person, but it often leaves a deep feeling of inadequacy or worthlessness. This is a wound that cuts to the core of one's identity, shaking their confidence in who they are and their place in the world. These experiences tell them that they do not matter or that they are unworthy of respect and love. When these messages are internalized, it can lead to a cycle of self-doubt, insecurity, and fear, all of which keep a person trapped in the past. For a girl who has been mistreated, the effects may reach far beyond the event itself, impacting how she views herself in relationships, how she sets boundaries, and how she believes she should be treated. The pain doesn't just vanish because time passes, it lingers, often in ways that aren't immediately obvious. It may show up in quiet ways like withdrawing from social interactions, difficulty trusting people, or self-sabotage in her personal or professional life. Acknowledging these wounds doesn't mean that they should be held on to forever or that the individual should be defined by them, but it does mean recognizing that they exist. When the harm done to her is dismissed or minimized, it can feel as if no one truly understands or cares about the impact it has had on her. Without acknowledgement, the healing process remains stalled. It's vital that we give space for the pain to be heard, validated, and understood. Only when this happens can we begin the work of rebuilding. The acknowledgement of wounds is also about allowing the girl to express her pain in her own way and on her own terms. Too often, the response to someone who is suffering is to push them to get over it or to move on. But this is rarely productive. While healing requires time and effort, rushing it or attempting to bypass the pain only leads to suppression, which can have long-term consequences. To heal, one must be allowed to fully feel what they have endured and understand its impact. This is not a passive act. It requires introspection, vulnerability, and sometimes a painful confrontation with one's emotions. And this acknowledgement of pain must come from those around her as well. Supportive individuals should not try to silence or fix her, but instead should validate her experience and offer a safe space for her to work through it at her own pace. In the process of acknowledging these wounds, there's an essential element of self-compassion. The girl who has been mistreated needs to learn to acknowledge her pain without judgment. This means she must stop blaming herself for the actions of others. Often, those who have been harmed internalize the belief that they somehow brought the harm upon themselves. They might think, if only I had done things differently, or I deserved this because of my behavior. These are dangerous thoughts that prolong the healing process. Acknowledging the wounds means letting go of self-blame and starting to treat oneself with the same kindness and compassion that one would offer to a friend in similar circumstances. The recognition of these emotional wounds is not a call for endless victimhood, nor does it serve to reinforce a narrative of helplessness. Rather, it's the first step toward empowerment. It says, I see the pain, and I know it's real, and from there, the journey of healing can truly begin. Without acknowledging the wounds, there can be no real growth or recovery, and once that recognition takes place, the path forward becomes clearer, one built on the understanding that healing is possible, but only if the wounds are seen and treated with the care and attention they deserve. Healing is a process that requires active participation from all involved, particularly the one who has been harmed. It's important to understand that healing isn't something that happens passively or by chance. It requires deliberate effort, action, and responsibility. For a girl who has been mistreated, the first step toward healing is recognizing that she is the one who holds the power to change her life. Healing may start with external support and validation, but it cannot truly take root until she takes ownership of her own journey. This doesn't mean that she should bear the entire burden of her recovery alone. It means that she must actively engage in the process of reclaiming her sense of self-worth, autonomy, and strength. It is her responsibility to take the necessary steps to begin healing, even if those steps feel daunting. Responsibility in healing is not about blaming oneself for the harm that was done. It is not about accepting responsibility for the actions of others or taking on guilt for something beyond one's control. Instead, it is about acknowledging that, despite the pain, there is power in choosing how to respond to the past and how to move forward. No one can change what happened, but we all have the ability to choose how we deal with the aftermath. This choice is empowering because it puts the person in control of their own healing narrative. Rather than being a passive victim to their circumstances, they can choose to be the active creator of their future. This is where the true power of responsibility lies. It lies in the ability to reclaim one's own narrative, to assert control over the healing process, and to take action, however small, toward recovery. While taking responsibility for one's own healing journey is essential, it is equally important that others, particularly those who care for the girl, recognize their role in her recovery. Friends, family members, mentors, and professionals can offer support, but they must understand that healing cannot happen for her, it must happen with her. They cannot simply fix the situation or take the pain away. They are not responsible for the harm done to her, but they are responsible for offering a compassionate, safe environment in which she can heal. Offering emotional safety, encouragement, and understanding is a critical aspect of this process, but it must be done in a way that empowers the girl to take ownership of her own healing. True healing requires not only the girl's own willingness to take responsibility for her healing, but also the understanding and support of others. When the people around her validate her pain and offer their support without trying to force a solution or rush the process, they help foster a sense of agency and self-determination. It's about creating an environment where she can find her own strength, take her own steps, and recognize that she is not alone in the process. The girl must be empowered to seek out the help she needs, whether that means talking to a therapist, reaching out to trusted friends, or simply spending time alone to reflect and heal. But this process requires responsibility to herself and to her own well-being. No one else can choose for her. And while others may be there to help guide her along the way, she must take the first steps. Healing requires discipline. It requires consistent effort, a willingness to face uncomfortable truths, and the courage to seek out the necessary resources to move forward. And it often requires difficult choices, such as confronting painful memories, setting new boundaries, or letting go of toxic relationships. Ultimately, the act of taking responsibility for one's healing is one of self-respect. It is an acknowledgement that no matter what has been done to her, she is worthy of the time, effort, and energy that it takes to heal. It is a decision to prioritize her own mental, emotional, and physical well-being, to invest in her own growth, and to take action toward building a life that reflects her true worth. This is the crux of healing, recognizing that, despite the pain, she has the right and the ability to choose a better future for herself. Healing may be challenging, and it may not happen in a straight line, but the decision to take responsibility for it is a powerful act that can set the course for recovery and growth. Healing in its truest form is impossible without respecting the autonomy of the person who is suffering. For a girl who has been mistreated, whether through emotional, physical, or psychological abuse, regaining a sense of autonomy is one of the most important steps in the healing process. Autonomy is about control over one's decisions, emotions, and ultimately one's future. It is about reclaiming the power that was taken away through mistreatment and beginning to make decisions that reflect her own needs, values, and desires. Autonomy is not a luxury or a side effect of healing, it is an essential component. Without it, the process remains incomplete and recovery will always feel out of reach. When someone has been harmed, especially in the context of a relationship, they often feel as though their choices have been taken away from them. Abusers, or those who mistreat others, often control, manipulate, or diminish the autonomy of their victims, telling them what they can or cannot do, who they can or cannot be, and what their worth is. The girl who has suffered through such experiences may start to internalize these beliefs, becoming disconnected from her true self and her ability to make empowered choices. It can be incredibly difficult to see beyond the constraints that others have placed on her, and the longer she lives without control over her own life, the more distant her sense of self becomes. In order to heal, she must rediscover her autonomy. This is not something that can be handed to her, it must be something she learns to take back for herself. The healing journey is about making decisions, big or small, that honor her sense of self. She must relearn how to trust her own instincts, desires, and feelings. This is especially difficult after experiencing mistreatment, as the very act of trusting oneself may have been compromised, but it's essential for healing. If she is to move forward, she must begin to make decisions based on her own well-being and not on what others expect or dictate. Whether it's a decision about where to live, whom to trust, or what kind of relationship she wants to cultivate with others, each choice is an opportunity to reassert her autonomy. One of the most powerful ways to rebuild autonomy is through the act of setting boundaries. Boundaries are an expression of self-respect, and they are crucial for reclaiming control. The girl who has been mistreated must learn to say no when something feels wrong or uncomfortable. She must recognize that she has the right to say no without feeling guilty or selfish. In a world that often teaches women to prioritize others, saying no can feel like an act of defiance. But it is, in fact, a declaration of self-worth. Setting boundaries means recognizing that her emotions, her time, and her energy are valuable and should not be given away to anyone who does not treat them with respect. Reclaiming autonomy also means recognizing that healing is a personal journey, and it is one that cannot be rushed or dictated by others. The girl who has been mistreated must be allowed to take control of her healing process. No one else can determine what steps she should take or how quickly she should take them. This may include deciding whether to seek therapy, how to cope with difficult emotions, or what kind of support she needs. Healing is not a one-size-fits-all process, and each individual must chart their own course. Autonomy in healing means making those decisions independently, even if that requires breaking away from toxic relationships or environments that prevent her from reclaiming her sense of self. It's also essential to understand that the process of reclaiming autonomy can be slow. After prolonged mistreatment, it takes time for someone to trust their own decisions again. The fear of being wrong, of being hurt again, can be overwhelming. But every small decision, whether it's choosing to speak up, choosing to stand firm in her beliefs, or choosing to seek help, is a step toward rebuilding that autonomy. It's a reminder that she is in control, that she has the right to take charge of her life, and that her choices matter. Over time, as the girl makes decisions that align with her true self, she begins to rebuild her identity. She becomes stronger, more self-assured, and more capable of navigating life on her own terms. Ultimately, reclaiming autonomy is about the restoration of dignity. Mistreatment often strips individuals of their dignity, making them feel as though they are less than human or undeserving of respect. But autonomy is a powerful act of reclamation. It is a recognition that despite the harm done, she remains a full person, capable of making decisions and determining her own path. Healing cannot happen without it. Because healing is not just about recovering from pain, it's about reclaiming the right to be the author of one's own life. The concept of meaning is a cornerstone in the healing journey, especially for someone who has endured mistreatment. When a person has suffered, it can often feel as though the world has turned against them, that nothing makes sense or holds any value, and that their pain is purposeless. However, healing begins not when we avoid or suppress this suffering, but when we are able to find meaning in it. This doesn't mean justifying the mistreatment or pretending that the pain wasn't real, but rather understanding that suffering, though deeply painful, can offer opportunities for growth, strength, and transformation. It is through the search for meaning that a person can transcend their pain and move beyond being defined by their suffering. Finding meaning is a deeply personal process, and it doesn't always come easily. For a girl who has been mistreated, the idea that her pain could have any value might initially seem impossible. The trauma might feel senseless, like a random event that has no rhyme or reason. But it's in the search for meaning that healing begins to unfold. When someone can shift their perspective on their pain, they begin to realize that while they cannot change what has happened, they can choose how they respond to it. The pain they feel can be reframed not as a punishment or a curse, but as an opportunity for personal evolution. It is through this reframing that they begin to reclaim power over their experience. Suffering, in this sense, is not an enemy to be defeated, but a force that can be integrated into their personal growth. This search for meaning is not a quick fix, nor is it a one-time revelation. It is a gradual, sometimes painful process of coming to terms with the past while forging a new future. For many who have suffered, there is often a deep need to make sense of what happened, to understand why they were hurt or why they were targeted. While it may not always be possible to answer these questions fully, the search itself can provide clarity and insight. Understanding that pain is a universal human experience can help reframe the narrative from one of isolation and hopelessness to one of shared humanity. This awareness brings a sense of connection, not only to others who have experienced similar struggles, but to a larger, more compassionate perspective on life itself. In addition to connecting with others, finding meaning often involves looking inward discovering inner resources that were previously unseen or unexplored. The process of healing requires strength, resilience, and courage, qualities that may not have been fully recognized before the mistreatment occurred. When a girl who has suffered begins to reflect on how she has managed to endure, she may come to realize the depth of her own resilience. This realization is powerful. It shows her that even in the face of deep pain, she has within her the capacity to heal, to rebuild, and to grow. This self-discovery is a crucial part of finding meaning because it shifts the focus from what was taken from her to what she can reclaim for herself. She may come to understand that her suffering, painful as it was, has strengthened her in ways that she hadn't imagined before. Finding meaning also requires embracing the idea that growth often comes from adversity. This doesn't mean trivializing the pain or pretending that the suffering is a gift, but rather understanding that through difficult experiences, individuals have the chance to develop new perspectives, deepen their empathy, and discover a more authentic version of themselves. It is through the struggle that one often uncovers their true strength. A girl who has been mistreated may come to realize that, despite the harm done to her, she has learned invaluable lessons about herself and the world. This new understanding of herself and her abilities is part of the healing process. Finally, finding meaning in suffering can lead to a sense of purpose. It allows the girl to shift her focus from what was lost to what she can offer to others in the world. In this way, the pain no longer remains a burden but becomes a source of connection and empathy. She may find that her own experience of healing provides an opportunity to help others who are struggling. The meaning she finds in her own suffering can then extend outward as she uses her newfound wisdom to support others who are going through similar challenges. By finding meaning, she transforms the pain into something constructive, something that transcends the immediate harm and creates lasting change both within herself and in the lives of others. In the end, meaning is not found by ignoring or running from pain, but by facing it, understanding it, and using it as a springboard for growth. Trust is an essential building block in the process of healing, particularly for someone who has been mistreated. When a girl has suffered, her ability to trust, whether it be trust in others, in herself, or in the world around her, can be shattered. The experiences of betrayal, neglect, or abuse undermine the very foundation of trust, leaving her feeling isolated and uncertain. In the wake of trauma, it's common for trust to be deeply damaged. Those who were supposed to protect her may have caused harm instead, and this makes it incredibly difficult to believe that others, or even herself, can be trusted again. Restoring trust is not a quick or easy process, but it is an essential part of healing. It is the bridge between the past and the future, allowing the girl to move forward with the hope that not only is she worthy of trust, but that trust can be rebuilt in meaningful ways. As empathy for herself grows, it opens the door for empathy toward others. When someone has been mistreated, it can be easy to view the world through a lens of mistrust and suspicion. There may be a belief that no one can be trusted, that people are inherently bad, or that all relationships are destined to end in betrayal. However, empathy allows the girl to view others as individuals with their own struggles, their own vulnerabilities, and their own wounds. While this does not mean accepting harmful behavior or excusing mistreatment, it does help her understand that everyone, including the person who hurt her, is shaped by their own experiences and struggles. In this way, empathy enables her to see the world with greater compassion, which ultimately leads to her emotional growth. It allows her to realize that healing is not only about overcoming her own pain, but also about learning to coexist with the complexities of human experience. Empathy also creates the foundation for healthy relationships. One of the consequences of mistreatment is often the erosion of trust and the fear of vulnerability. A girl who has suffered might find it difficult to open herself to others again, fearing that she will be hurt once more. But empathy helps her recognize that true connection can only happen when she allows herself to be vulnerable. It allows her to see that empathy isn't just about understanding another's pain, but also about being seen and understood herself. As she begins to trust again, she starts to build relationships that are based on mutual respect and compassion. The ability to empathize with others fosters an environment in which healing can take place, both for her and for those around her. Furthermore, empathy teaches the importance of forgiveness not as a passive acceptance of wrongdoing, but as an active choice to understand the pain that others may have experienced. When someone hurts us, it's easy to focus solely on the damage they've done, on the injustice of the situation. But empathy asks us to take a step back and consider the broader context, what led them to act in this way. What suffering might they be carrying? This doesn't justify the behavior, but it can open the door to a more nuanced understanding of human actions. For a girl who has been mistreated, this doesn't mean she must forgive immediately or reconcile with someone who has caused harm. Instead, it simply offers her the possibility of releasing some of the anger and resentment that may be keeping her bound to the past. Empathy also plays a crucial role in preventing future harm. When a girl who has experienced mistreatment begins to cultivate empathy, she becomes more attuned to the emotions and needs of others. She begins to recognize when someone is struggling or in pain and understands how important it is to treat others with care and respect. This awareness strengthens her relationships and helps her avoid toxic or harmful dynamics. It teaches her to recognize red flags and to set boundaries, ensuring that she doesn't repeat patterns of mistreatment. Empathy becomes a guide, helping her navigate the complexities of relationships with a deeper understanding of both her own needs and the needs of others. Ultimately, empathy is an essential part of the healing process because it allows a girl who has been mistreated to reconnect with the world in a meaningful way. It helps her move from a place of isolation and bitterness to a place of connection and understanding. Through empathy, she can find the compassion to heal her wounds and to build the kind of relationships that nurture her well-being. It teaches her that while pain is an inevitable part of life, it doesn't have to define her. She is capable of both giving and receiving empathy, and in doing so, she creates a life that is rooted in connection, compassion, and mutual respect. The process of healing is often closely tied to the idea of growth, and for someone who has experienced mistreatment, growth can feel like an elusive or even impossible concept. The wounds from mistreatment can leave lasting scars, both physically and emotionally, that make it difficult to envision a future where healing and growth are even possible. However, growth is not only possible but essential for anyone recovering from pain and suffering. It's important to recognize that growth does not mean forgetting the past or pretending that the harm that was done to her was insignificant. Rather, growth is about transforming the pain into something that propels her forward, turning adversity into the strength needed to live a fuller, more meaningful life. In fact, the capacity for growth often arises from the very struggles that seem unbearable. Growth in the healing process begins with the recognition that suffering is an inevitable part of life. While it's natural to want to avoid pain, the truth is that it's often through hardship that we learn our deepest lessons. A girl who has been mistreated may initially feel overwhelmed by the idea of growth because her pain feels all-consuming, but over time, it becomes possible to see that her suffering does not define her future. The key is to shift the narrative from one where she is the victim of her circumstances to one where she is the creator of her own response to those circumstances. In this sense, growth is a form of empowerment. It's the ability to choose how she will use her pain, what she will learn from it, and how she will move forward. This shift in perspective is transformative. It allows her to reclaim control over her own narrative, even if she cannot change the past. Growth also involves learning to see oneself in a new light. When someone has been mistreated, their self-worth can often be shattered, leading to feelings of inadequacy, shame, and doubt. The pain of mistreatment can make it hard to believe that they are worthy of love, respect, or happiness. But growth requires confronting these negative beliefs and challenging the internalized messages that may have resulted from mistreatment. It's through this process of self-reflection and self-compassion that she can begin to recognize her inherent worth. Growth, in this sense, is not about becoming a perfect version of oneself. It's about accepting oneself as human, complete with strengths and flaws, and learning to appreciate those qualities as part of a broader journey. As her sense of self-worth is rebuilt, she can start to see the beauty in her resilience, in her ability to endure, and in her capacity to learn and grow from the difficulties she's faced. One of the most profound aspects of growth in the healing process is the development of emotional resilience. The girl who has been mistreated may initially feel as though her emotional well-being has been irreparably damaged. She may fear that she will never be able to experience joy, peace, or love again. But growth involves discovering the inner strength to not only survive but thrive despite the pain. Emotional resilience is the ability to face adversity, to endure hardship, and to come out the other side stronger and more capable. It's about learning to ride the waves of difficult emotions without being consumed by them, recognizing that even the most intense feelings will eventually pass. As she grows emotionally, she begins to understand that her pain, though deeply painful, does not define her. Her emotional landscape becomes more expansive as she learns to navigate not just the darkness of her suffering, but the light of her hope, her dreams, and her potential. Growth also means learning to embrace vulnerability. After mistreatment, there is often a desire to protect oneself from further harm, to close off the heart and retreat into a safe, impenetrable space. But true growth requires the courage to be vulnerable again, to risk feeling and connecting with others, even when there is a possibility of being hurt. It's through vulnerability that meaningful connections are formed, and through these connections, healing occurs. The girl who has been mistreated must learn that vulnerability is not a weakness but a strength. It is the courage to open oneself up to the world again, to trust others, and to experience life fully. This process of embracing vulnerability is essential for growth because it allows her to rebuild trust to engage with others and to form healthy, supportive relationships. Additionally, growth is about developing the tools and skills needed to protect oneself in the future. While mistreatment may leave deep scars, it also provides an opportunity to learn important life lessons. The girl who has been mistreated can use the knowledge gained from her experiences to set boundaries, to recognize red flags in relationships, and to advocate for herself in ways she may not have been able to before. These skills of self-protection are not about closing off from the world, they are about creating a space where she can flourish without fear of being harmed again. Growth involves learning how to protect her emotional, physical, and mental well-being while still remaining open to the possibilities of life. Ultimately, growth is not a linear process, nor is it something that happens all at once. It's a journey that unfolds slowly over time, with setbacks and breakthroughs along the way. Some days may feel like progress, and others may feel like a struggle. But growth is about staying committed to the journey, trusting that even when progress seems slow, it is still happening. It's about accepting that healing is a complex and ongoing process that requires patience, compassion, and the willingness to evolve. The girl who has suffered mistreatment has within her the capacity for extraordinary growth. The strength to move forward, to learn from the past, and to create a new future is always there, waiting to be tapped into. Growth, in the end, is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. In conclusion, healing from mistreatment is not a linear or easy journey, but it is one that is ultimately transformative. It begins with acknowledging the pain, understanding the complexity of the emotional wounds, and recognizing that healing is a process that requires time, patience, and self-compassion. It involves the restoration of trust, not just in others, but in oneself, and the courage to embrace vulnerability despite the fear of further harm. Forgiveness, empathy, and growth play pivotal roles in this process, each offering the girl a path toward reclaiming her sense of self and her power over her future. Through empathy, she learns to view herself and others with understanding, and through forgiveness, she liberates herself from the burden of resentment and anger. Most importantly, healing requires growth and evolution that turns the pain of the past into the strength and wisdom of the future. Though the journey may be long and filled with challenges, it is one that leads to a deeper connection to oneself and the world around her. As she rebuilds her trust, her self-worth, and her ability to relate to others, she finds the resilience to move forward. Healing does not erase the past, but it enables the girl to transform it, turning the scars into symbols of strength. Through this process, she not only heals but grows into the person she was always meant to be: empowered, whole, and ready to embrace the future with hope. The first and perhaps most challenging step in restoring trust is rebuilding it within oneself. When someone has been mistreated, self-trust is often one of the first casualties. The ability to trust one's own instincts, decisions, and judgment can be severely damaged. The girl may doubt her ability to protect herself or to make the right choices, and this lack of self-trust can contribute to feelings of helplessness and anxiety. But healing begins with restoring this internal trust. Rebuilding trust in oneself requires patience, understanding, and a commitment to self-compassion. It means recognizing that, despite the harm she's endured, she has the ability to make decisions that align with her well-being. Over time, as she makes small, empowering choices, her confidence in her ability to navigate the world and her emotions will begin to grow. Each choice, whether it's something as simple as setting a boundary or speaking up for herself, reinforces her ability to trust herself again. While regaining self-trust is vital, it is equally important to restore trust in others. For a girl who has been mistreated, the idea that anyone can be trusted again might seem foreign or even impossible. Trust was broken by those who were supposed to care for her, and this can leave a deep scar that takes time to heal. However, the process of healing requires the willingness to re-engage with others and rebuild those connections. Restoring trust in others doesn't mean that the girl must immediately forgive or forget what was done to her. It means taking small, cautious steps toward allowing new, healthy relationships to develop. Rebuilding trust with others happens gradually and requires an environment of safety, consistency, and respect. It's important that she learns to trust again, but this must happen on her terms. She must decide who is trustworthy and who is not, and she must feel empowered to walk away from relationships that do not respect her boundaries. One of the key components of restoring trust is the presence of people who are genuinely trustworthy, those who show up consistently, honor their word, and treat her with respect. Trust cannot be rebuilt in a vacuum. It requires others to participate in the process. Those who are in her life must demonstrate through their actions, not just words, that they are worthy of trust. A safe, supportive environment is crucial for rebuilding trust, and it's important that those who care for her understand the patience and understanding that are necessary for this healing. Trust, once broken, is fragile and it can take time to restore. However, consistent and genuine support from others can provide the foundation for the girl to slowly begin trusting again. Moreover, restoring trust is also about understanding that vulnerability is a necessary part of the process. In order to heal, the girl must be willing to open herself to others, to risk being hurt again in order to experience the possibility of genuine connection. Vulnerability doesn't mean that she must immediately expose herself to situations where she could be harmed, but it does mean that she must be open to the idea of trusting again. This requires an understanding that although vulnerability carries the risk of pain, it also carries the potential for love, connection, and growth. It is through vulnerability that true healing occurs, when she allows herself to connect with others in an authentic way, without the armor that was built to protect herself from further harm. But this process must happen gradually, and it must be done in a way that feels safe. Restoring trust is not about returning to the state of vulnerability that existed before the mistreatment occurred. It is about establishing a new kind of trust, one that recognizes the lessons learned from past pain, but still allows the possibility of genuine connection. This new trust is not naive or unguarded. It is wise and informed by experience. It is built on the understanding that trust must be earned and that it must be cultivated with care. As trust is rebuilt first in oneself, and then in others, a foundation of safety, respect, and love begins to form. It is this restored trust that allows a girl who has been mistreated to step forward into the future with a renewed sense of hope and possibility. Trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. And through this rebuilding, the girl learns that she is worthy of trust, that her voice matters, and that healing is possible. Forgiveness, especially when it comes to healing from mistreatment, is one of the most challenging and complex aspects of the recovery process. For a girl who has suffered emotional, physical, or psychological harm, the notion of forgiveness can often feel like an impossible task. The pain she has endured may seem too great to be excused, and forgiving those who have hurt her may feel like an act of betrayal to herself. However, forgiveness is not about excusing the wrongdoer's actions or erasing the pain. It is about freeing herself from the weight of resentment, anger, and hatred that can continue to hold her back from healing. It's an act of releasing the power that the harm done to her has over her emotional well-being, allowing her to move forward without being constantly defined by the past. Forgiveness begins not with the other person, but with herself. The first step in forgiveness is recognizing that holding on to anger, bitterness, or resentment does not heal the wound, it only perpetuates the pain. These feelings can act like anchors, keeping her tied to the past and preventing her from fully embracing the present or future. While it's natural to feel hurt and anger when mistreated, these emotions can become overwhelming and self-destructive if left unchecked. The longer she holds on to these negative emotions, the more they consume her, preventing her from experiencing peace and happiness. Forgiving herself for holding on to the pain is often the first step in releasing the emotional burden. It requires recognizing that she is not weak or wrong for feeling hurt, but that continuing to hold on to that hurt is what keeps her trapped. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what was done to her. It's not about pretending that the mistreatment never occurred or that it wasn't significant. In fact, forgiveness does not require erasing the past or its effects. What it does require is the decision to stop letting the past dictate her future. It is about choosing to live without the constant weight of anger or bitterness, which can be like an invisible chain, keeping her bound to the trauma. This decision is an empowering one because it means that she is taking control of her emotional state and choosing to move forward rather than remain stuck in a cycle of pain and resentment. For a girl who has been mistreated, forgiving the person or people who hurt her is a complex decision. It doesn't mean that the wrongdoer should not be held accountable for their actions, or that their actions should be minimized. It simply means that she is choosing not to allow the harm they caused to control her emotional life. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as an obligation to reconcile with the person who caused the harm. However, it's important to recognize that forgiveness does not require her to engage with or trust the person who hurt her again. In fact, forgiving someone doesn't mean giving them permission to continue causing harm. It simply means releasing the hold that their actions have over her own sense of peace. Forgiveness can also be an act of self-liberation. By forgiving, she is no longer tied to the emotional manipulation or control of the person who mistreated her. The act of forgiveness allows her to regain her sense of autonomy and power. It's an affirmation that she is no longer dependent on the actions or approval of others to define her sense of self-worth. Forgiving others is ultimately about protecting her own mental and emotional health. It allows her to regain her freedom and gives her the opportunity to focus on her own healing, rather than allowing the harm done to her to consume her thoughts and emotions. Forgiveness is a process that takes time, and it is not linear. There may be moments when the pain resurfaces, and the temptation to hold on to anger may feel overwhelming. This is normal, and it's important to allow herself the space to feel these emotions without judgment. Forgiveness is not a single event, but a continual choice. It may take time to truly let go of the pain and anger, and it may require revisiting the decision to forgive several times before it fully takes hold. However, as she continues to choose forgiveness, she will begin to feel the emotional release that comes with letting go. It's a gradual process of healing, one in which she can reclaim her emotional autonomy and peace. Finally, it's important to note that forgiveness is deeply personal. It cannot be rushed or forced. The girl who has been mistreated must come to forgiveness in her own time and in her own way. She must be allowed to process the pain and anger before making the conscious choice to forgive. There is no timeline for forgiveness, and it is not something that can be dictated by others. It must be a decision made from within, a choice to release the grip that resentment and hurt have on her life. When forgiveness is truly chosen, it is a powerful and transformative act. It enables the girl to reclaim her emotional freedom and take the next step in her healing journey. It is not an act of condoning what was done, but an act of choosing peace, power, and the ability to move forward in her life. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, plays a profound role in the healing process, especially for someone who has experienced mistreatment. For a girl who has been harmed, there may be a temptation to withdraw from others, to build walls around herself in order to protect her heart from further pain. This instinct to guard herself is natural and can provide a sense of safety in the short term. However, the long-term path to healing involves opening up to empathy, both for herself and for others. Developing empathy doesn't mean excusing the wrongs done to her, nor does it mean accepting mistreatment. Rather, it's about creating a space where healing can take place, where she can reconnect with her humanity and the humanity of those around her. One of the first places where empathy must be fostered is within herself. A girl who has been mistreated may carry feelings of shame, guilt, or anger, often internalizing the hurt as something that is her fault or that she somehow deserved. In these cases, empathy becomes a tool for self-compassion. It allows her to step outside of the pain and view herself with understanding and kindness. She may need to remind herself that the harm done to her was not a reflection of her worth, but a result of someone else's poor choices. Being able to empathize with her own pain is a critical step in the healing process. It's about acknowledging the suffering she has endured, validating her feelings, and offering herself the same compassion that she would offer a close friend in similar circumstances. Self-empathy is a reminder that she is deserving of care and respect, even when others have failed to provide it.